So this was tricky because for the sake of a 10-minute YouTube video, we had to distill this down to 5. And I've had a good think about this, and I've come up with the top 5 best stretches that I can think of, and these are all aimed very specifically at improving your posture on the bike for the purposes of reducing weight on your hands, better balance on the bike, more aerodynamic advantages, this type of thing, and particularly comfort in the neck and the upper back in particular. So it's one of the things that most people who sit at desks all day have trouble with, sitting in this rounded kyphotic, what we call a kyphotic posture, which is a forwards curve in your thoracic spine. You do this long enough and you do it for many, many decades, most of us sitting at desks, and you start to develop habits which hunch and round you over. And we'll get some footage of these stretches later, and I'll show you why that's important on a bike. I think we touched on this in that video we did about neck pain, but I'll go over it again in the context of these stretches.
I think I need this.
Yeah, it's a good way to spend time, like late at night before you go to bed. You just put your phone down, don't look at the blue light, and just lie down and stretch for 10-15 minutes. It's relaxing, it's calming, and it also helps with general flexibility and stuff. So, this stuff is pretty easy to do, and it's pretty low cost in terms of effort levels, and it has quite big benefits. So just a reminder, these stretches are not specifically targeted at resolving an injury or a problem or a muscular tightness that might be, causing you a specific spot of injury or pain on the bike. These are just mainly about postural improvements, if you like. So the first 2 are specifically aimed at reducing thoracic kyphosis, or the lack of extension of the thoracic spine, the propensity for the thoracic spine to round forward. This will allow you a longer reach to the bars, a lower torso angle and this type of stuff, and less neck pain from running out of the neck extension that's required to look down the road ahead of you for hours on end when you're on the bike. Huge problem for a lot of people who have desk jobs. They're much more prone to this type of issue. And it's also worthwhile for serious cyclists as well, looking to improve their aerodynamics. Yeah. So the first stretch, I'm fiddling with this device here. Full credit for this one goes to Steve Hogg. Now, I've seen versions of this in the past. You can buy devices which are injection molded rubber devices shaped like this, and they're about $40. Wow. Or you can use, as Steve calls it, the $2 stretch. You can use 2 tennis balls in a sock.
Right.
With a rubber band holding them so they don't come apart.
Is that sock washed?
It was. It was in 1995.
Okay, cool.
I believe. Yeah. So what you do with this, we'll get some footage of me and I'll show you, because talking about it is much less easy than showing you. You lie down on your back and you put these on either side of your spine, starting at sort of the lower section of the thoracic spine, and you bend your knees up and lift your bum slightly off the ground. And these will basically force themselves in on the left-hand, right-hand side of your spine. The spinous processes, the little bony protuberances down the spine, they will sit in this gap, and this will forcefully extend each vertebra. And you spend about 2 minutes or 1 minute, depending upon how short on time you are, on each vertebra all the way up through your upper back. And this will basically free up the vertebral segments to allow you to extend much more strongly. I tend to follow this one up with stretch number 2, which is just a prone extension stretch where you lie down on your front. And depending upon how good your thoracic extension is or how bad it is, you arch up on your elbows for a prolonged period, couple of minutes at least, or you actually push up on your hands. And I'll show you both of those variations, and we'll overlay the footage. Both of these stretches involve firstly segmental and then general extension of the thoracic spine, which will basically allow the thoracic spine to not be so rounded. And you can see just, from me hunching to me sitting straighter, my torso gets 50 mil longer. So, you can tolerate a fair bit more reach and drop to the bars if you've got better thoracic extension. This is an easy way of improving it. This one is pretty intense. Once a week initially, then twice a week after that for about 10 minutes. It's pretty intense. There's a bit of bruising and stuff involved initially until you get used to it. So the next 3 are aimed at reducing a rider's general propensity for developing overuse injuries on a bike, and these are not related so much to the upper back. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, right? So there's a bunch of other things, but these are probably the three that I could think of which would confer the most benefit for the lower half of the body. A 4-point stretch or a deep gluteal, piriformis, external rotator, internal rotator stretch. I'll show you what I mean by that on the ground in a minute. We'll overlay the footage. This is a really good one for the deep muscles in the back of the glutes, which are often a site of low-grade tension in a lot of people because their Q factor's a bit wrong, which we're going to talk about today, or their seat's a bit too high, or there's a lot of things that can cause it. But deep tension in the back of the gluteals is one of those things that is a very good thing to stretch out. And hip mobility on a bike, for obvious reasons, is a pretty valuable thing. A lack of hip mobility is not so great. So the 4-point stretch, hip flexor stretches, when I'll show you my version of it later. You've had some experiences with hip flexor troubles in your past related to hip impingement, which is another topic for hopefully later this morning. So hip flexors tend to get shortened and irritated and annoyed on bikes because of the closed down hip angles. The hip flexor is forced to bend around the junction angle between the torso and the femur, and it doesn't love doing that in a lot of people, and hip impingement issues from underneath the hip flexors can irritate them. They basically are one of those areas where the hip flexors can't be too long in most cyclists. So you might as well stretch them. They will confer benefits in terms of on-saddle stability. The rider will rock less, all this sort of stuff. And lastly, a lumbar rotation stretch. This is just lying on the ground, dropping one leg over with your shoulders held flat. If you're really hypermobile into rotation, as I am, you have to do it off the edge of a bed because your range of motion will be too great. And I'll show you all of this later. This one is just good for general lower back mobility. It also does cross over into the glutes. You'll often feel a gluteal stretch while you're doing this one. It'll stretch your ITB on the leg that's hanging off the edge of the bed, that kind of stuff. Those three for the lower limbs, if you're short on time and you've got a couple of half-hour sessions a week to stretch, those three for the lower limbs, you can't go wrong. A lot of people will notice that I've left out the hamstrings. Hamstrings are funny. A lot of people come into me and they can't touch the ground when they flex forward. My hammies are always tight. But on a bike, they ride really nice and low. Their torso is on a really nice low angle. They have no problems with it. The hamstrings never really approach terminal extension. They never reach their end of range on a bike because the knee is always flexed. So I won't say it's impossible, but it's fairly rare that short hamstrings are the reason the rider rides very upright. So if you're looking at increasing your ability to reach and drop down on a bike, that stuff is generally more limited by saddle design. So as the rider rolls their pelvis forward, if the front of the saddle is causing pressure problems, they will roll back from it and then sit really upright. Or hip impingement issues, as you would know a little bit from your position, has always been reasonably upright because you don't have great internal rotation of your hips, and as they rise at the top of the stroke, they run out of range. So your brain rolls your pelvis back to relieve the hip impingement. So hamstrings, they're not a bad thing to stretch, but you probably won't gain a lot of ability to go long and low by stretching them. Now, a few notes with these. The muscular stretches, hold the stretch for a good length of time, 1 or 2 minutes at a sustained level. So none of this just I'm just going to stretch. There we go, done. Doesn't work that way. If you want proper connective tissue lengthening and you want your nervous system to acclimatize to lengthened muscle positions, which is really what stretching is all about, you want to sustain the stretch for a long period, 1 to 2 minutes at a time. The longer the better. It doesn't need to be intense. So don't stretch super hard for a short period of time. Stretch at a low level for a long period of time. Much more effective. And the thoracic spine stretches 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then the three that I just showed you at the end there, another 10 or 15 minutes. And then you've got a 20 to 30 minute stretch session, and there's plenty of other ones you can throw in as well, and you can vary it. This is, like I said, by no means an exhaustive list, but hopefully they might help you get a little bit longer and lower on the bike and limit neck pain. And I'll show you, I'll jump on one of perhaps your bike or mine that we can stick on a trainer later, and I'll just show the riders again, the viewers, the ability to extend the thoracic spine to limit that cervicothoracic junction angle is really, really valuable at preventing neck pain and upper body discomfort. So having the first two that I showed you, probably more important than the last three, even though they all involve the upper body. Okay. Yeah. So for a huge number of people, really valuable to stretch that part of your body in the upper half.